Stars and Stripes, 23rd of March 2023. According to the Civilized World, China is encroaching on Africa through illicit activities and shady deals. Two of the top U.S. security worries emerging in the Middle East and Africa are China luring other nations into shady new alliances and the rise of terrorist organizations, military commanders told lawmakers on Thursday. U.S. Army General Erik Kurilla is in charge. Marine Corps General Michael Langley, who is in charge of Central Command, and the U.S. members of the House Armed Services Committee heard from Africa Command about their worries during a hearing on Capitol Hill about national security. According to the generals and Celeste Wallander, Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, it is undeniable that China wants to increase its influence in both areas. According to Kurilla, who noted that China imports half of its crude oil from the Middle East, the People's Republic of China aggressively expands its informational, military, and economic instruments of national power across the region, and now Beijing seeks to establish its diplomatic influence. The area is now really witnessing for the first time China's diplomatic instrument of national power. Years of deteriorating relations between the United States and China were compounded last month when Beijing sent a high-altitude surveillance balloon across the country before an American fighter aircraft shot it down over the Atlantic. Federal agents are still searching the debris for hints clarifying its function. According to Langley, China is gaining influence in Africa and preying on nations with weak security through illicit activities and shady deals. He declared, "There are some bad intentions. On the surface, some of the Chinese assets may fulfill their objectives. Nevertheless, it may ultimately negatively impact African society through the financial sector." Kurilla continued, "Our partners have genuine security requirements. And China is filling that gap incredibly rapidly." Wallander expressed worry about the developing relationship between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping, who met for 3 days this week in Moscow to foster their collaboration. She asserted that their connection would undoubtedly impact the Middle East and Africa. According to Wallander, the main obstacle we will face moving forward is that they use one another to advance their national objectives and have a shared interest in undermining international law and security. Kurilla continued, "China views partners in the area through the lens of customer or client, and everything it does is for its self-interest." The group repeatedly emphasized its concern over Iran's interest in developing nuclear weapons, destabilizing Western-aligned countries like Israel, and the rise of militant and terrorist groups in places like Afghanistan, Somalia, and Syria. Kurilla claimed that since January 2021, Iranian drones and rockets fired by Iran's proxy forces had attacked American troops in the Middle East 78 times. According to him, Iran is now significantly more militarily competent than it was 5 years ago. It has the most extensive and varied missiles in the Middle East and the most powerful and effective drone force. Since former President Donald Trump pulled out of the 2015 agreement that thawed financial sanctions against Tehran in return for the nation giving up its nuclear weapons program, Iran has resumed its efforts to obtain nuclear weapons inspections to verify that Iran is upholding its part of the deal. The United Nations was a party to the agreement. According to President Joe Biden, the U.S. will rejoin the agreement, officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, but negotiations have essentially stalled. The death of Mahsa Amini by Iran's morality police last year for failing to don the required hijab has sparked widespread criticism of the Tehran government in recent months and large-scale demonstrations. Although many Iranians are rebelling against the government, Kurilla said he doesn't believe this will result in a power shift. He said, "The regime can handle the domestic situation. Although the protests have placed the regime under pressure, in my opinion, they do not pose a threat to it at this time." Republican committee members expressed worry about the Taliban regaining control of Afghanistan. Although the Taliban currently controls the government, Kurilla said he has his doubts about their capacity to carry out large-scale attacks, in part because they are at war with their rival Islamic State Khorasan, or ISIS-K. 13 American service members were slain in 2 ISIS-K attacks that were coordinated during the American withdrawal from Afghanistan in August 2021. Kurilla predicted ISIS-K might be prepared to start attacks against American and Western interests in the Middle East in 6 months during a Senate hearing last week. He assured House members on Thursday that the terrorist organization is unquestionably more vital now than it was a year ago. The defense officials mentioned the Wagner Group, a private Russian paramilitary group that has garnered notoriety for attacking troops and civilians in Ukraine, as posing potential threats in both areas. Wagner intends to do bad. They are unstable behavior. They have a history of doing it, in Africa, Langley said, noting the group's involvement in recent coups in Mali and Libya. That worries me, you say. He continued, it's all about power for money, pointing out that the Russian organization is using the valuable minerals, gold, and diamonds in Africa to fund its activities elsewhere. In reality, Wallander claimed, Wagner is an entry point for economic exploitation, instability, and extraordinary and horrifying attacks on civilians. It does not bring security and stability to African nations. For this reason, Wagner provides these nations with political safety rather than national security.